Hey, Mike, good to be with you again.
Great to be with you, man. I'm looking forward to jamming on mental health, and I'll kick it to you. What are some things that are alive for you around mental health right now?
Yeah. Well, we were just doing a brief pre-chat before we hit record here and talking about, of course, May is Mental Health Month. And what's really alive for me in that personally is really trying to understand what does it actually mean to be an advocate for mental health? Like, what does that mean to participate in an ecosystem that is supportive of mental health? Because I think it's a month where there are a lot of both individuals and organizations talking a lot about mental health and having all these beautiful campaigns. But I'm really interested in what are the things that are happening like on the ground year round to really support people's mental health, because I think there is a tendency to be some posturing here. Like, organizations want to be seen to support mental health. But yeah, I think it's a nice opportunity for us to get real and maybe reflect here together, also for the benefit of people here who are joining us, who maybe are leaders or influencers in some way that can affect the culture of an organization, and are a little bit like, yeah, what can I do? What can I do to support the mental health of the people that I'm leading or responsible for? So
Hmm.
I'm curious, because you also work with some leaders, Mike. So I'm imagining you've had some conversations around this too. But what do you feel like is important to give voice to?
Mm. Yeah, I want to I think one thing that's coming up for me is that I maybe even want to take a firmer. I think you're taking a firm stance, but one way that I am sitting with this in this moment right now is that there are certain values that are espoused by a lot of leaders and organizations, and with May being Mental Health Awareness Month, I think a lot of organizations are putting out things like it's okay to not be okay, but what substantiates that, right? I think that's a real question that I want to be sitting with. How are you actually making it so that it's okay not to be okay, and not just some blanket statement that you're putting out there? And from what I see, if you follow the bottom line of organizations, that the investment in, I don't know, technical expertise, or I don't know, pay for employees. There's a lot of different ways that companies are investing that it's not actually backing up. We need to make mental health a priority, or things like diversity, equity, and inclusion. They're almost like popular things to say these days, but who's really backing it up? And
Mm.
uh, something I wanted to talk to you about today is maybe some more practical ways that we as leaders and organizations can actually make these tangible realities, and not just things that we say while employees go to their corner and say, like, I don't know who to talk to when I'm feeling stressed, or I don't know how to have this difficult conversation,
Mm.
or I don't feel like it's okay for me to skip a day or two because my mental health is not okay. And those are real things. And it's not, I think, so one thing that I want to presence right now is that I've been thinking a lot about this distinction between mental and physical health. And if you were to say, tell someone that you tore your ACL, no one would look at that as a some sort of character flaw, or like, if you need to go to the doctor for that, you wouldn't need to make some sort of built-in excuse around it. It would just be accepted. But if
Mm.
you said, I'm having really, like, my mental health is not okay right now, I feel anxious so much that it's hard for me to envision doing a day of work, then I think, there's some shame around that. There's It's more likely that someone would have some sort of judgment around you, and that you would internalize shame about it. And B, it's maybe the response would be something like, well, buck up or something, bootstrap it. We're all under pressure here. So yeah, I think it's imperative for organizations to honor that mental health isn't some fluffy thing. There's real challenges involved. I just wanted to presence that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a really important thing to be aware of. And I think also important to acknowledge the nuance of that, because I think mental health is kind of, it's a little bit like beauty, right? It's in the eye of the beholder. Is what is the actual experience of that person. And we all have different thresholds, different tolerances of certain things happening around us. Even robustness in being able to cope with things like doing long hours and thinking for extended periods of time at a high level. I mean, we do have real differences there. So I think it's also something that's important to have some flexibility in it, not be too rigid. And part of the challenge in that is how do we say, what is the responsibility of the person to say, hey, I'm not okay, and what is the responsibility of the organization, as you said, to go, it's okay that you say that you're not okay. And then there's that layer that you mentioned as well of the shame, and it's a really tricky thing to navigate. And I think that's the thing that some of these campaigns can sometimes bypass is how complex it is, how nuanced it is. Like what do we do? And just trying to think of a way to make it tangible with an example. But even so, if there's an employee that's underperforming, the conversation happening around them might be, this person's too slow, or they're not functioning how we need to, like they need to do better. And then it's like, at what point is the question like not on a performance level, but on a well-being level, actually? So there's just so many different ways we could look at this, so many different things to consider. But yeah, I think it is a really nuanced topic.
It is. So in terms of practicality, I mean, one thing that comes up for me that I think organizations can do to make a lot more space is something like at the beginning of every meeting, have a proper check-in. Everyone just say where they're at personally, or what's up for them. And that can foster immediate connection. And there's something about being in a group and being seen that if an organization took it upon themselves to say, when we go into a meeting, this is a place where you can share what's up for you, that, I don't know, your dog is sick and you're having a really tough time coping with that, and it's hard to think about work right now. Just one person sharing I've very rarely seen a check-in like that not foster some sort of depth of connection that helps people feel more settled and more connected, more sense of belonging. And the cruel irony of this all is that I think productivity happens as a byproduct of that anyway, but organizations are so focused on productivity and output, and it's looked at, mental health is looked at as this kind of thing that gets in the way of it sometimes. But if we actually make mental health the top priority, the results that organizations want will just take care of themselves anyway. So it doesn't have to be this massive overhaul that needs to happen for practical results to happen. If we just allowed a little bit more space for check-ins and meetings of what's really going on in your world, that would make a big difference already.
Yeah, I think so too. And just one of the conversations I quite often have with my coaching clients is how to align yourself with values. And I think mental health as an organizational value is a really interesting one, because it can change sometimes the question that's asked in some of these contexts also. And I think the check-in at the beginning of a meeting is a really interesting one. And if it's a bigger meeting, maybe like a 2-word check-in, something as simple as that, like, how are you doing? Anxious and curious. I don't know, probably not going to get those two at the same time, but these just simple words just to feel the vibe that's in the room. And also in the context of performance, a viewpoint that's sort of grounded in mental health and putting that at really the top of the priorities list would be probably not, why are you not doing a good job, or like, why are you so slow? But how can I help you? How can
Mhm.
I support you in delivering what needs to be delivered? And so I think it changes the way that we address some of the circumstances that pop up along the way too. And I think this speaks a little bit to this idea of psychological safety, also,
Yes.
which I think sometimes is a little bit, again, used as a posturing kind of tool.
Mhm.
And we have to ask the question again, like what is that? What does that look like in terms of practices? So I think your meeting example is a good one. And I think there's probably a lot of others that are specific to the type of business that you're working with as well, and the structures that are in place as it is. Because it tends to be that, unfortunately, human resources is not really somewhere that people can go to get mental health support. Quite often it's actually more a administrative sort of support function. I've heard lots of stories of people having difficult experiences with actually knowing who to ask if something is a bit difficult for them.
Mhm.
And this is where I really see the value of things like mentoring programs also, that have a performance element, but also have a well-being element. It's simply just camaraderie, having somebody in the organization that's tracking you and actually cares how you're doing and makes time to ask how you're doing.
Mhm.
There's a lot of different practical things that can be brought in.
Yeah. No, I love that. And that's where I think roles that we play, coaches can be really helpful, therapists, if organizations actually made that available, that would go a long way as well. I know that at organizations I've worked at, there are hotlines that you could call or HR people, but as you already beautifully pointed out, a lot of times they're there, but it's not actually providing that, I don't know, that sense of safety that you're talking about.
Mm.
So yeah, there's so many different things. Like what else feels alive for you around making mental health more of an active, year-round, deep commitment that organizations can actually enact and not just speak to for a month, and then kind of the same old gunk is still there for all of for all of time, that we haven't actually gotten to the root of anything. What are some other ways that you're looking at this, or maybe some personal illustrations that come up for you?
Yeah, maybe this sounds a little bit intangible, but perhaps you can help me with that. But
Sure.
by way of a metaphor, there's a lot of research being done around the idea of the flow state and how to get yourself into a flow state, and that there's certain things that you can do to sort of create the circumstances in which flow state can happen. So it's not necessarily something you can turn on and off, but you can work with your circumstances to, yeah, create the highest possibility that it will occur. And I
Hmm.
think mental health is a little bit like that as well. It's like we need to really look at the ecosystem in which mental well-being, mental health can happen. And that's why I have a bit of a reluctance of having sort of an add-on, sort of an extension of the business that just looks after mental health, because it's almost too far removed. Like it needs to be
Yeah, yeah.
happening all the time. And that's why I think things like mentoring programs are useful, because you've got somebody else who's got their eyes on you, and they've also got their eyes on what's happening in the business. They understand the stresses, the day-to-day activities, the things that are pulling you in different directions. Like it needs to really be embedded in the fabric of the day-to-day operations and in the culture. So it's another one of those things that we lob on leaders and say, this is your
Hmm.
responsibility, right? One of those tricky things, but everybody needs to participate in that.
Hmm.
And I think also really building skill sets around communication,
Hmm.
and fast communication, communication that's direct, and cleaned of judgments. Ideally, something like nonviolent communication, I think, is a really fantastic tool, and I would love to see that being used more in workplaces. But I think the more we can shorten some of these communication cycles, I think the better off people are also,
Hmm.
because I think time and unresolved challenges, they tend to sort of have a multiplying effect. If something's left too long and not addressed, it gets worse and worse and worse to an increasing extent. So I think in terms of, yeah, how do you upskill people to look after mental health? That's probably a good place to start.
Yeah, there's a framing in here that is something like mental health is a skill that's comprised of many skills, and actually one of them is the ability to communicate. That's a really important one. So something that I'm in touch with right now as you speak to this is that yes, I think communication is a skill that a lot of organizations talk about, but there's what are some ways I want to say this? I think on one hand, a lot of, and we've spoken about this before, there's a lot of attention paid to the content of what we're saying, but not to the tonality, our body language, paying attention to what's happening in our maybe sensations that we're feeling, emotions that we are feeling in our body. There's lots of other ways that we can be communicating that are typically not welcome in my experience at the workplace. So there's a lot of talking that happens, but not a lot of listening, and not a lot of paying attention to more than the words that are going on. So there's always energy and dynamics of the room that if we're able to better listen to what's happening within us, we can get more information. So I think that's something that I wanted to bring here, including saying, hey, I'm just noticing some anger as I think about this deadline that's coming up for me. I'm just noticing some anger and some defensiveness in me. And I just wanted to reveal myself here and make that clear and see what that's communicating. Because very likely, if you're experiencing anger, there's some sort of like, this isn't reasonable. I don't know if we can meet this deadline. And a lot of the breakdowns in communication that I see are there's an expectation of the organization or of leaders that this is a deadline or a timeline that we want to get done. As someone who's not at the leadership level, it's imperative on me to get it done. And then maybe I don't meet the deadline. Person gets mad at me for not meeting the deadline. What was the breakdown? You don't listen to me, blah, 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 right? So I'm sure that's a familiar interaction for you. It's certainly a familiar one for me. A lot of that can be avoided if we have an open line of communication in the beginning to make space for, so check-ins do allow for this, but also there's been so many times in meetings that I've been in where there's like a silence that happens, and I imagine there's so much information that's moving through every person that we don't pay attention to. And that's one of the ways we can dig at the roots of where the mental health challenges are, because then it prevents people from going into corners, gossiping, saying this person's not reasonable, this person's incompetent, all the different ways. So yeah, I think that another thing that was coming up for me as you were sharing was just the way that I think a lot of I think of this with myself a lot of times, whether it's my development or title changes that I've got at the organization. There's this implicit expectation that as you grow and evolve and ascend a ladder, that you have to have it more together in some way, right? So I think another way that we do ourselves disservice as leaders and as organizations is that the CEO or other people that are, high up in rank in the hierarchy of the company are not. I don't know if I've ever heard a CEO of an organization that I have worked at start to just talk about a vulnerability that, I'm having a really tough time right now in my life. I just wanted to bring that to ERI's attention. Or I don't know what goes on behind closed doors, but for a CEO to have a space, or for other partners at a company, for them to have the space too, to say, I know I'm being counted on right now, but I don't know what to do. Don't know what to do. There's so much pressure on someone at that level to just like have the answer. And that causes a lot of mental health challenges for sure. Because no one has all the answers. We're all fallible. We all we're all human. So there's just so much that came up for me here, but those were some of the main things.
Yeah. I love that. And I think Just sort of to add a layer on that one as well, I think sometimes it is really hard for leaders because they're like, well, these people are relying on me. Like that's the reality. Like these people are getting a wage in their bank every month because of me and me keeping the thing going here. And of course, everybody's replaceable to some extent, but the general experience is that I'm not. People are relying on me, and it is true for a large part. And so I think it's like, I don't know what to do, and I'm committed to finding a way through it.
Mhm.
So not just the demonstration of the vulnerability, which I think is really, really important, but also this trust in one's own capacity. Of course, you don't want to force that if it's not there, but I think that that is a personal responsibility that everybody who's leading gets to take on to keep working on their capacity and to have the appropriate support around them, even if it is on a more intimate level, like having a one-on-one coach to really help them where they're forgetting about their capacity, forgetting to believe in themselves. They've got to keep investing and working in that so that they can stand in front of people and say, yeah, I don't have the answer yet.
Correct. Yeah. No, something I want to add here, because you're doing a good job of highlighting it. It's not the job of a CEO, nor would it be a good idea for a CEO to stand in front of their entire organization and say, I have no idea what I'm doing. That's not helpful. If that is something that is happening inside of them, there needs to be a space, not in front of the entire company, but there needs to be a coach or a small intimate group that they can go say that to.
Absolutely.
With also, yes, we're going to get to the bottom of how I know that we can figure this out. I just don't know what to do right now. But in my experience, there's a lot of missed opportunity. The CEOs are not having that conversation a lot of the time. That they are, for the most part, are internally experiencing, I have no idea. They're not telling anyone else that they have no idea, and they're marching forward regardless. And it just creates chaos and confusion in the company ultimately, which then becomes this downstream effect of everyone feels like it's chaos. It's my fault. Whatever. And then the anxiety and the stress and all of that becomes almost the culture of the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's an interesting one. What I've noticed in a lot of the people that I'm supporting in my practice is that they tend to be the type of leaders that are not necessarily lone wolf, but really leading from the pack, if you know what I mean. Like they're the people that really do want to be involved in the business and are there to support everybody. However, there is still this feeling inside of them that even though I'm here, I'm in the pack, I'm on the ground and helping the company go where it needs to go, I'm still feeling really alone. And I think it's because of that thing that you say, that there's not that space where the sort of the confession, if you like, can be full, where it's like, yeah, I'm really not sure on the next step now. I just hope that it's going to be okay, but I don't know. And I know that there's a lot of people relying on me. And that can be really dreadfully lonely to be in that space. So I do think it's important, like you say, whether it's with a smaller management team or whether it's literally just in the therapist's office or the coach's office, just as long as there's a space where that can be made real and reflected back a little bit, so that person can take the steps that they need to get back into a position of personal power and feeling that they know what to do next. And even if it's not a nice thing that needs to happen next, like a difficult decision around laying staff off or something like that, discontinuing a product, these are real decisions that need to be made, and they truly do impact people on a personal level. But yeah, I think there's so much more room to be real about it. And I see in my clients, well, just being able to speak it out and then hearing it coming out of their mouth and then going, actually, that's not completely true. I have got this. I've got some ideas. It's just it's actually a different question. It's just I'm having trouble prioritizing, perhaps. And so there's all kind of things that can emerge when we actually have an opportunity to speak the truth. And yeah, whether it's that example or the example that you use when you're noticing things happening in real time, like I'm noticing I'm getting a bit frustrated because we're nearing the deadline and you still haven't delivered this thing to me. but just giving voice to things that we might be afraid to give voice to. It creates such an opportunity for shared experience. I think it's a big factor in mental health.
Yeah, maybe creating some sort of group space too, where CEOs of other organizations too are collecting in some way, right? They're meeting, and yeah, there's so many different opportunities that people have to have shared spaces where it's like whatever is up for you, bring it, and there's nothing that needs to be hidden. So yeah, in some ways, I'm actually in touch with there is a lot of there are a lot of people doing amazing work around this, and there's so many places that people can go to get the support that they need. But yeah, what else? Is there anything else that feels imperative to you to bring up in this conversation? Or like, I think an inquiry or a question that I'd want to be in right now is if a leader or someone who's heavily involved in organizational decisions is watching this right now, what's one thing that you'd want to have them walking away with or thinking about right now?
I think whether it's an individual, whether it is somebody that's responsible for looking after others, I think just reinforcing this idea that you don't have to do it alone. I think the experience of feeling alone in something is really difficult. Also, if you're somebody who does feel responsible for leading a team, you're like, yeah, I know I need to do something about supporting mental health here and maybe tweaking the culture that we have inside our team or our organization, but I don't know what. Is ask for help, like seek somebody who does this. As you said, there are a lot of incredible organizations and individuals, consultants of different types around the place. Even picking up a decent book. I think you and I are a little bit familiar with the work of the Conscious Leadership Group as well. While I don't love the word conscious in the context of leadership, because I think it's got a lot of sort of stuff around it, but I think the concepts that are taught within that conscious leadership framework are really, really valuable. So I'd encourage people not to be put off by this idea of being a conscious leader, but it's about being a leader that is fully there and available to meet everything that is going to come onto their plate as a leader. So yeah, really working at dissolving that illusion that we have to solve all of these problems. Don't like that word, but solving the problems. Yeah, I'm very picky on the linguistics, as you know. But yeah, realizing that you don't have to be alone in these things. So that would be my one invitation, is to ask people to really lean in, be curious, be open-minded, and be willing to get a little bit uncomfortable. Because even just that example that you share of everybody doing a brief check-in at the start of a meeting, the first time that you do that, it's going to feel really weird.
Yes.
If you've never had those conversations with people before. So be prepared to feel weird. Be prepared to just test the edges a little bit and lean into it.
Yeah. I think I figured out a headline for us to use for this conversation, by the way. And I wrote down here, mental health is a team sport.
I love that.
It really is. It's not this individual thing that we need to figure out in our own corners. It's a team sport. We're all walking each other home, right? I think that's I think that was Ram Dass that said that. But
yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
One other comment, and then on what you said, and then maybe I'll share a reflection on what I would want someone walking away with. Conscious Leadership Group, make no mistake about it, if that sounds a little airy-fairy to you, it's very practical, almost a handbook on how to be in touch with all of who you are and communicate that effectively and navigate conflict, and like all of the essential skills on how to be the best leader possible are in that book. So it's called The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. And I want to make no mistake about it. That's a very practical book. It's not some, fancy ideal. I think anyone could learn a lot from it. And it's helped me a lot in my relationship with my wife and being a clear communicator. It's really, the essence of the book is how do I get in touch with what's happening in me and how do I communicate it really clearly, is the long and short of it. I just want to sit with it right now, right? So in the spirit of discomfort, like there's a part of me that wants to say something really profound and eloquent right now, but I don't know exactly what I'd want someone to take away right now if you're tuned in or with regard to mental health. Yeah, I'm just noticing the desire to be really profound and how I'm drawing a little bit blank right now, and how it would be beautiful actually if at organizations, if I in the middle of a tax meeting was able to just say this right now without feeling like I would get judged or shamed or something like that. That would be a beautiful thing to just to be able to sit with. I'm not sure, but I know like we spoke about. I know there's something here. I know that there's some really profound wisdom inside of me, and if we could make an effort as people, as cultures, as organizations to allow people to be who they are. I've had so many conversations with people who are really yearning to uh, bring more of them, so their real self, or bring more of their full self, or bring more of who they are into work. And that's what brought me into coaching in the first place. I just felt like there's a show Severance on Apple TV. I don't know if you've heard of it, but
No.
the basic premise of the show, the main character who experienced a really tough loss, his wife passed away. He had this operation done in his brain so that when he's not in the office, then he exists as the person he's been for his whole entire life. But he goes into the office and there's something in his brain that flips and he becomes a totally different person.
Mm.
And so he doesn't have any memory of his wife passing away or any of that. And I think that one of the things that the show, my interpretation, my lens, the show, it seems to be underscoring that a lot of people are doing this in reality anyway. We're like, we go into work and we become this kind of boxed up version of ourselves. And we leave work and then we are like, oh, could finally be me again, with all my insecurities and all my vulnerabilities and all my pain and all my joy. Uh, so yeah, there's the hope of this character in the movie was that he wouldn't have to feel when he goes into the office. He wouldn't have to feel with all his stuff that he's bringing around in his life. But actually, my hope for this conversation is that someone leaves feeling just, even if it's just a tiny bit more permission to bring all of everyone into their workplace. Make that like a really bold invitation that we welcome all of you in the workplace, and the structures you can put around that. I don't know, that's not something I could speak to as well, but I do very much know that if people feel the sense of belonging, of I could be who I am here and not some vanilla, more boring version of myself, but rather like really all of me, and I feel safe being that. What a beautiful thing that would be. And it's not just some tagline for a month. It's a way of living.
Yeah, I love that. Well, it sounded like you were surrendered to not having something profound, but I think that's pretty profound, Mike. So I think it's something that will probably have a resonance of truth for most people. It certainly does for me. This idea of severing certain aspects of us that might be inconvenient when we go to work, or this has been the flavor of this conversation. But yeah, so I think it's a beautiful invitation. Bring just a little bit more of ourselves into the game, into the team sport that we're playing when we have a place. So yeah. No, I really appreciated this conversation, Mike. So thank you for keeping it real as always, and really welcome any thoughts or reflections in the comments to make this conversation a team game, and yeah, all participate in that ecosystem that is fostering mental health.
Yeah, well, thank you, and thanks for bringing up the incredible topic and for keeping it real too.
Yeah, thank you. We'll speak soon. Bye-bye.